Christ is among us. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming. In about 2009, I was contacted by National OCF, Orthodox Christian Fellowship's campus ministry. I had done some work with them before, among which were the trips called Real Break, which is an alternate spring break trip where you take kids to do service and instead of just go get party and bomb somewhere. I had done that at Project Mexico and at the orphanage with the nuns in Guatemala, Hogar Rafael. And they said, we have a project we want to try. It's the first time we'll be going this kind of far, but we want to go to Romania. And we want to know if you want to lead the group. There is a priest in Romania who in his parish started an orphanage, essentially. I don't like to use the term orphanage because we think of an institution, right? A big, ugly, cold building with, lots of sad kids in it and so forth. It's not really an orphanage, it's really a ministry. But they're taking care of children, they're taking care of the elderly, they're taking care of mothers who are in need of shelter with infants, they're taking care of some mentally ill people, all out of their village parish, basically. And they have groups of young people go throughout the year in Europe and go and work there and help with the kids and do service. And we would like to take a group of OCF kids. Would you be willing to lead the group? And I was like, heck yeah, that sounds amazing. I want to do that. And I did. In 2010, I led my first group to Valea Plopului. Can you say that? Valea Plopului. Plopului. It means the Valley of the Poplars. The Plopului, the poplars. The place was a wonderful shock to the system, but at the same time profoundly familiar to me, having grown up with a Romanian family. I'd like to say when I went to Romania for the first time, it was the first place where I ever went where everything made sense. Like here in this country, there's lots of competing visions and worldviews, so you don't always know where you stand, where you lie, and how things work. Like went there and like as crazy as it was like made 100% sense to me, because it was like being in my family, except the whole nation was my family. And it was a beautiful experience. I fell in love with the country. I fell in love with the ministry there, with Father Tanase and his family and the staff and the kids and the families that were there. And it was an absolutely incredible experience. And so I went again the next year, led another OCF group, and then I think the year after that, I led a group from this parish. We took 3 of our young adults and my daughter, who was just turning 9 at the time, who's going to be turning 21 this year. So it was a long time ago. And I haven't been able to go back since. The OCF trip has been taken over by our friend Father Robert in Annapolis, so he leads a group there, and he's gone on to create like pilgrimages to go to Romania if you'd like to visit and find out more about it. So it's a really great opportunity. But most of us in our lifetime will not necessarily have the opportunity to maybe go and do this kind of thing. We're going to be sponsoring a Project Mexico trip this summer. So any of you who would like to take a week, August 1 through 7 is our dates. It's a great opportunity to go and to have this kind of experience working with families, working with children, working with the poor. I don't know what you think of when you hear that, but the poor are basically people who just have less than you do at this point. They live normal lives, they're normal people, and they're beautiful people, and you shouldn't have any weird stereotype in your head about that. And this program in Valea Plopului began when somebody, Father Tanase, Father Nicolae Tanase, who's a very He's a very holy priest with a nice big bushy black beard, looks like a big bear. And he's a very funny, wonderful sense of humor man as well. But somebody, he was, you know, preaching a life, a pro-life type of message in Romania after the revolution, because very quickly the abortion rates were going very high, and he's like, please, you know, don't abort your children, bring them here. And so somebody took him up on it. And so he said, would you please take this child? And he said yes, and it was, I think it was in the middle of winter is the story, and he had the child in like a little like basket thing, you know, that he had, brought him in. He had to do service, so he brought him into the church and set him down, you know, and people were like, what's that noise? What's that sound? And there's a baby in the church, what's going on? And that's how it started. And by that one example of sticking to his word and preaching the faith in love, the people in the community began to follow the example. And they started to take on more people until the parish kind of house community center there became the first iteration. And people were also taking people into their homes because they're village people. And I don't mean like the disco band from the 70s. They're regular folks living in a rural countryside in Eastern Europe. It's not a fancy way of life. The homes are not huge, but they're warm and they're cozy. And when they cook a meal, they cook a big pot of stew or a big pot of soup or a big loaf of bread. And so there's plenty to share. And so that's what they said. What's one more mouth when you're making a big pot of stew? And so little by little, the community started taking on, as a whole parish, this ministry of taking in those whom the world was going to throw away. And it started with infants, but it grew quickly to children, to also mothers with children, to the elderly who were being neglected or abandoned, and even some kids who, if you remember, one of the great tragedies coming out of the communist era was that Ceausescu had all these kids in these state institutions, and they were so neglected that as infants they stopped crying. You know how babies will cry when they're hungry? They were so abandoned that they didn't even do that anymore. They were just like zombies. It was almost like environmentally caused shutdown. And I've met some people as adults who have went through that, and it lasts in you, and it makes a long mark. And so there are some of these kids that then were released into the cities and were living on the streets and then even in the sewers because it was a place of shelter. And some of these kids were brought, young women in particular, were brought to Valea Plopului, and then it branched over to the next village, Valea Plopului, and they started taking these large 3-story big homes with multiple kind of apartments in them and building them, and then building a community center, building churches, and all these things. And now, like, this whole village next door, Valea Plopului, where the center is half the village is this string of homes and buildings that serve this ministry. And so it got quickly to be, I think it was around 300 some souls being taken care of when I first went. By 2020 or so, it was up around 400, 450 people. And they were doing work in the nearby town, the larger town, Valea de Munte, I guess that's valleys of the mountains or something. And then also it's another ministry started with one of Father Nikolai's sons, starting it in Posești for some other folks. And it got to be about 450 people. And now they were getting these kids to the point where they had to send them to high school and get them into colleges, just like with Project Mexico, kind of, they aged up and realized, oh, we have to keep helping them to get them off on the right foot. And then, the war. Russia invades Ukraine last year. There was already a war, in essence, going on in the eastern regions of Ukraine, but now obviously became very hot, very dangerous, and there was a mass displacement of people. As you know, many of them have gone to Poland, but a large number have also gone to Romania. And because Pro-Vita Orphanage has a policy of not saying no. If you, this is my hope, that if no one else wants me when I'm an old man, I'm gonna buy a ticket to Romania, because I know they can't say no. They don't say no to them, they'll figure it out. They'll make it work. It's absolutely amazing. It's the way only kind of people from that part of the world can manage, right? It's the kind of a craziness about it that it just somehow falls together and works. And they said, yeah, we'll take it. And so they took, first they had something like 50 or 60 kids that were being brought, then they had 50 elderly people from Ukraine that didn't have a place to go, and now, just in the last month or so, they've got like another 25 to 50 more kids, including kids who, many of whom are mentally disabled, some have untreated autism, some are from institutions in Ukraine that were not very much better than the state institutions that had been in Romania, so very neglected. And now they're bringing them. Plus, a whole group of women with children are in that possessed community now called Pro-Vita of Saints Bruncovianu. So it's like an auxiliary mission in another town. So all of this they do, by the way, without government subsidies. They're getting a little bit of government subsidies for the Ukrainian refugees, but throughout this whole period, they did not do it with state subsidies, because they wanted to, the state subsidies mean state control as well, right? So there's issues there. So all of it was through funding, primarily through people in Europe and in Romania. And in the United States, there is a group called the American Friends of Pro-Vita Orphanage, AFPVO.org. And interestingly, it's rooted right here in Fairfax County. And as a nice providential reality is that before I even went with OCF, there was a group of American kids going every year to Valea Plopului to work with these kids from St. Stephen and St. Agnes School here in Fairfax County. So the majority of American donors to this orphanage are these kids from an Episcopalian private school. And Father Sean Cavanaugh, who works there, has been organizing that. He's on the board of the American Friends, and he's been taking kids there over the years and doing great work with them and giving them this opportunity for service. So in the United States, among the Orthodox churches, this ministry isn't as well known as we would like, and it's only really being supported. It might be being supported directly through Romanian churches, but in terms of other churches with American Friends, it's our parish and St. Mary's in Minneapolis, which are the main Orthodox donors. But most of the donors to Valea Plopului in this country are not Orthodox Christians, which is wonderful, while at the same time embarrassing. I'm happy that they're getting awareness outside of us, but at the same time, I would love to see more of us be aware of it. So this Sunday, the Sunday after Theophany, every year for many years, we did what's called the St. John's Dinner. That's what you smell. If it's not incense, it's meat and cabbage. And that's what's cooking downstairs for you. And every year since I think we were preparing to take our group from the parish, we've been doing this dinner as a fundraiser, maybe even from the beginning when I first went, but it's been a long time. And we put together some traditional Eastern European food, Romanian style food. It's all the same amongst those countries, though, on the borders, the Balkans and Ukraine and so forth. And the goal is to raise funds for Valea Plopului, for their ministry that they do there. And we work with American Friends to direct that fund, because they're really close with the Tenaces and help them direct it directly to where it's most needed. As you can imagine, all of this that's happening to them has been extremely difficult. They were always kind of, running on fumes and the thinnest margins and so forth, and always somehow making it work. But I mean, this has really kind of gone beyond their abilities, because during COVID, of course, the pandemic, there was a loss of a lot of the ability for people to help and to travel in country from the EU, etc. The funding was diminished, I'm sure, as well. I know our funding went down because we weren't able to do the dinner, so we gave a little bit each year, but it wasn't the same as it usually is. So I'm really hoping this year we will, as a community, come together and you will enjoy the food, but more importantly, you'll be very, very generous to this very important ministry. This is one of those things where it's not a global ministry, it's not a nationwide ministry. It does have a global impact right now, in essence, because of the war situation. But it is a very specific thing in which everything you do is going to have a direct impact on the life of somebody in need. It's a very real, concrete situation. And good news is that this year, AFPVO, through this month, has a matching donor situation. So whatever we raise today for St. Mary's will be doubled. And at the risk of making our own dinner look less, I will also tell you that if you donate directly to AFPVO as a new donor this month, it'll be a 2-to-1 match. So if you were doing it through PayPal per se, or something like that, or you're willing to do it that way, you might want to go directly to their webpage as a new donor and do it that way, because you'll have a 2-to-1 match. If you're willing to do it through St. Mary's today, we'll get a 1-to-1 match. So we'll double whatever we do today, no matter what, but we can do even more. And so I really hope that you will do so. One of the connections that we have with this Sunday, besides the fact that it's a traditional time of the year to have a New Year's dinner with these kind of foods, is that on the Sunday after Theophany, we hear this gospel that talks about the Lord's coming, that look those who sat in the valley of darkness, upon them a light has shined. These people who are being ministered to in Valea Plopului have, in much of their life, lived in a valley of darkness. But when they came to Valea Plopului, the valley of the poplars, a light shined on them. People noticed them. People started to value them, to recognize their humanity, to show them dignity, to show them love, and to show them care. A light shined on them, and they came out of the shadow of the valley of death. So, brothers and sisters, I hope that you will let your light shine, that your God may be glorified through your good works today. Christ is among us.
He is my shadow.